Okay, for materials we're going to use to put this truck back together. What we have here is for bolts, okay, brand new bolt kit. You get 11 bolts in the box, and this is the Dorman bolt kit for the 5.3 GM engine. The bolt kit number is, you can see there. Okay, for the gaskets, my go-to for exhaust manifold gaskets is Felpro. And the reason I go to Felpro is okay, so the Felpro exhaust manifold gaskets is it's a metal gasket with a graphite foil surface on it. Okay. Now this stuff is very forgiving for sealing up on rough surfaces, as well as accommodating some of those possible variances in the manifold that I spoke of. Unlike the original gasket, which is, where did I put them? I'll find them in a few minutes here. Yeah, we'll find them in a few minutes and show them. Oh, they're over here. They're right here. Okay. So the original gasket. Original gasket is 3 solid sheets of thin stainless steel. And basically it relies on carbon to build up into the crack in between them that ultimately seals them off. Okay? Well, if you have much variance in the head, that might not reseal. The OEM stock gaskets may not work on a repair job such as this. Okay, so I use the Felpro gaskets and the Felpro gasket kit for the GM 5.3. There you go, that's the number. Okay, so that's the materials I'm going to use to bolt the manifolds back on the truck. The next thing I'm going to do is some dimensional checks. Now, would you agree that the thickness of the gasket and the thickness of the manifold and the length of the bolt, along with the depth of the hole in the head, are critical to how much clamping and sealing force you're going to get on the gasket? I hope you do. And that's one of the reasons why we make sure that the holes are clean, crystal clean, right to the bottom of the hole. And that's also one of the reasons why I do a dimensional check before I reinstall any of these. It doesn't occur often, but it has occurred where even right from the factory, those dimensions have been off, and was ultimately the root cause of the problem that we had. So with the fasteners. So here we go. We've got here just a little sketch. Have a look. Okay. So basically what I'm trying to show here is, here's the head. Here's the hole in the head. Here's the gasket thickness, manifold thickness, bolt length. Okay. And when that bolt is threaded all the way through and torqued down, we're looking for a space at the end between the end of the bolt and the bottom of the hole. And that space is going to be our clearance. If that bolt is too long, or these items are too thin, or this hole is not deep enough, when that bolt is threaded through, or yeah, threaded through and then torqued down, the bolt bottoms out in the hole. You actually don't get any clamping force here at all. You just get a lot of internal stresses in the bolt. Alright, so we're going to take some dimensions of our old materials and our new materials, along with the manifold and the holes in the head. And we're going to do a little bit of math here. We're going to figure out that yeah, the old one was okay, and yes, the new one with our new materials and new bolts are also okay. Now, what should we have for clearance at the end here? I mean, it could be just about anything you want it to be. I'm a bit of a technical guy, so I tend to look at the old item and I look at, okay, well, what kind of depth did we actually get? The lighting isn't great here, I'm sorry. Anyway, I'm looking for markings, indications on the bolt as to where the threads were and where the threads were not. So that gives me an idea on how much bite that old bolt actually had. And on a fastener, I'm looking for a bite of at least 2 times the diameter of the bolt. Okay, so I want 18 millimeters. It's a 9 millimeter bolt. So basically, I'm going to want 18 here, ideally. And the clearance is going to be whatever's left. That's my minimum. I can tell you a rule of thumb for, my rule of thumb for a blind bolt hole like this is 2 millimeters. That's the clearance I'm looking for. Okay, so my math looks something like depth of the hole plus the depth of the gasket plus the thickness of the manifold has got to be more than whatever the length of the bolt is. Does that make sense to you? Okay, and whatever the difference between those two is, will be the clearance. So we should be also be able to say, you know, we could say the clearance is my bolt length minus all of that. So we got H plus G plus M, right? Okay, I hope that makes sense. Now, how are we going to interpret that last one here? Well, if our bolt is longer than that distance, then our calculated number is going to be positive, and that actually means we have interference. The bolt is bottoming out. So I can say also here where, you know, positive value is interference, which is bad, and a negative value is going to actually be clearance, which is good. Okay, and as I mark down up here, I would like that to be 2 millimeters. So my target for clearance is actually going to be minus 2 millimeters. I'm going to put this all together. Okay, so let's get out some calipers here. Get out the calipers, and let's go take some measurements. So we're going to measure these items, and I'll measure at the engine, I'll measure the depth of the hole, and I'll measure, well really that's all there is to measure at the engine. Except at the engine I'm also going to measure, let's see if I can sketch this here while you're online. Just to verify things, I'm going to measure depth of the hole with a bolt threaded in. Sorry, that was my battery going low again. With a bolt threaded in and bottomed out. Okay, and I'm going to measure this distance, and that's really going to be my back check against the math over here. Okay, so let's go get some measurements. We'll be right back. Results. So we have, well, basically old bolt 30 millimeters, the old gasket measured between 1 and 1.2 millimeters thick, a new bolt 29.75 millimeters, new gasket a little bit thicker than the old 1.4 to 1.6, manifolds driver's side 10.4 to 10.8, passenger side 10.6 to 10.8. The holes in the head were measured at 21.6. So then if I go through the math, I can get this figured out. According to this, the old setup had a clearance of 3 millimeters. What that means is there's 3 millimeter gap on the end here when it's all torqued down, and the new one is going to be 3.65 when it's all torqued down. Well, that's before the gasket gets compressed. Okay, so it's probably going to come down to be same 3, which is more than my target of 2, so we're all good there. And as a secondary back check, I screwed a new bolt and an old bolt into the head till they bottomed out, and I measured this distance, and that's what I got: 10.38 millimeter on the old one, 10.92 on the new one. So then if I take only these two together, the gasket and the manifold, and I add their minimum values together, so 1 plus 10.4 gives us 11.4, which is more than 10.38. It's basically 1 millimeter. So that means the actual, in practice, there's probably 1 millimeter of clearance on that bolt, on the old bolt. On the new one is going to be 1.4 plus 10.4 gives us 11.8, which is, well, roughly a millimeter more than the gap that I measured. So in real life, there should be 1 millimeter on the end there. All right, so the math says we're good to go. that check says if I'm really concerned about it, I should take the new bolts, stick them on the bench grinder, and take 1 millimeter off the end. I'm undecided if I'm going to do that or not, but I probably won't. I'm confident in the numbers here. So that's what we're going to go with. Next step is to clean up the head surface, which involves well, let's go over where there's some light. That's going to involve some scraping and smoothing and wire brushing to get that all cleaned and ready to receive the gaskets and the manifolds. So that's what's next. Oh, just wanted to show you with respect to cleaning out the holes and what I'm looking for in terms of how do I know when they're clean? I know when they're clean when I can screw them all the way in with my fingertips with no issues, no challenges. Every single hole is like that. Nice and clean with the old bolt, and same thing, nice and clean with the new bolts. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed that little segment on the math. I mean, that's also hopefully you never encounter interference and everything is good to go, but now's the time to check, because it really sucks to get it all bolted up and then you still have a leak and you can't torque down enough to stop the leak without breaking the bolt.